I think conflict is the reality of when two people or two parties, at least two parties, come together and in a attitude of participating or working together, they come to a disagreement of opinion, a disagreement of, philosophies, some type of disagreement, and you're going to have conflict. That's conflict. And there's healthy conflict, negative conflict, destructive conflict. But I think once you hit disagreement, which you're going to hit as a leader, every leader faces it. Every person faces it if you have an opinion on anything. Whenever you come to a disagreement with somebody else or another party or multiple parties, typically what I like to do is I want to smooth over that. I want to make peace. I don't want there to be a disagreement. You want people to like you. And conflict sometimes will bring out negative emotions from other people towards you. And so for me, I hate that. I want to be a liked guy. I didn't get into ministry for people to hate me. So when, someone has a disagreement with you, man, it's just, I realize how it makes me feel immediately. And so my first inclination is to back away. And so I have to think about it, process it. I think it's a healthy thing, because then it helps me understand, hey, do I need to go in a good direction? Do I need to push forward through this conflict and try to handle it a certain way? Or am I wrong? And if I'm wrong, well, that's okay. I correct it, be humble about it and move on, I think when you're in conflict, it is vitally important that you have people in your life that you trust, respect, and are also willing to be honest with you about the truth of what you're dealing with. And so, first of all, at a couple levels I operate on. One is as a pastor of a church, and so we have a team of pastors that I work with, and in that team, we have honest conversation. That anybody's welcome to call anybody out as long as we do it because we love each other and we care about each other. And we'll talk about ideas honestly and openly. And sometimes that means even through that we disagree, even in that meeting about conflict. It might be conflict about conflict, but at the end of that, you're working out what's true and what's right. And then, I've got another friend who's kind of external to even just that team. And he's a guy that, I know who cares about me. He cares about the Lord and wants me to grow in my relationship with the Lord. And he's not afraid to tell me the hard thing. And I think for most of us, most people, especially even in leadership and ministry, I think most leaders do not have an honest friend, a friend who loves them, but is also honest with them and is willing to tell them the hard things. We have friends who are loyal to us and are willing to be kind to us, be sympathetic, be on our side. And we need that too. We need those sides as well, but we need that sharpener, that iron in our life because the iron sharpener, if he's going to be honest with you when you're wrong, he's also going to be in your corner when you're right. And you need that encouragement to push you forward, to deal with the conflict in a healthy way. We recently merged churches with another church, and the merge has gone great. But in the process, there has been we inherited a legal issue that we didn't know was a legal issue at the time. And it brought up some very big conflict, probably the biggest conflict I've ever seen in ministry. And honestly, it's been one of those situations where the more we've unraveled, we've realized that we're dealing with a particular party that has caused a lot of conflict wherever this party has gone. And so as we start to unravel that, we've realized that everywhere this party has gone and caused conflict, no one has ever stood up to the conflict. Everyone has just backed down, and avoided it. And I think people by and large are conflict avoiders. And so for me, and our team, we really talked a lot about this. Do we avoid it? Do we just leave it alone? We had a lot of counsel dealing with this particular conflict, but we felt that the right thing to do is to stand up to this particular party in order to move forward in the mission God had called us to as a church.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think for me, trying to figure out in your mind, is this worth standing up to the conflict, confronting the conflict in a healthy way, in a Christ-like way, and dealing with it in an appropriate way? I think there are times when you should walk away from conflict in certain situations, and there are times when you should confront it. And I think that the times when walking away from that particular conflict, now again, I think you got to weigh the situation, right? Like in a church situation, you're dealing with your people in your church. I think and they're your members and you're a pastor, or, I realize, there's a lot of different probably people who will be watching this, but from a pastoral standpoint, I think you should at least bring up the conflict, right? And deal with it at one level. But there are some things where you go, I realize this as a husband, and with my wife, like sometimes my wife wants to vent about something and she wants me to listen to her, and I don't need to solve it. I don't need to fix it. I just need to listen. This is not Bobby putting the fix it hat on. This is Bobby putting the listening hat on. I'm going to hear her out, listen well, and she's good. She's good to go. And so I think sometimes we just got to figure out which tool do we bring into the toolbox when we deal with that particular piece of conflict. And some you have to confront head on, and that's the ones we typically want to avoid, the hard ones. Well, we see conflict throughout Scripture. I mean, Paul and Barnabas, they had their conflict and they wind up separating. And in that, God multiplies the ministry. God works through both parties and two teams of ministry, and we see great things that happen as a result of their conflict. And even dividing as a result of their conflict. So I think there are times when conflict causes us to have irreconcilable differences, and we have to even walk away from that conflict because of the severity of it or whatever. I mean, we even tell people in our church, if this isn't the church for you, maybe theologically you don't line up with where we are, philosophically, we don't try to stop them from leaving. We go, man, can we help you find the right place for you to fit and to serve and to plug in that? Because we realize this is who God's called us to be, and it seems like you're not fitting this particular, category for us. And that conflict just seems like you're constantly rubbing those gears, and you're never resolving it. On the other hand, there are times when it's negative, and you go, but you know what? I'm going to deal with this. I'm going to listen well. I'm going to have a great conversation and try my best to work through and understand what's going on. And some of those times it's just a misunderstanding. One person thought they heard something, from you, or you thought you heard something from them. And as you kind of work through that misunderstanding, you realize, man, we just didn't speak well on the front end, and you deal with it, and then things are good again. So I think there are times when you're going to part company, and times when, you work through it, and you guys are closer together than you were before. So conflict resolution, it really helps you figure out when is the right time. And I think more often than not, because most people I think are conflict avoiders, if they would just have a conversation, it would clear up a lot of the misunderstandings and a lot of the negative, things when things go south. I think if they just would deal with it directly, they would find a lot of it's just misunderstanding. But in all that saying, there are still times when you got to part company and you got to leave. Even recently with our conflict we've been dealing with, and this is a particular party outside of our church, but we have a team and that we're working with on our team, and it's a team of pastors and it's a team of lay people. And there's one particular guy in our lay team, and he's a soft-hearted, kind-hearted, gentle spirit. I mean, he's one of those guys you want. He's just loyal. He's amazing. I mean, just one of those guys are just rare gifts of people. And so this guy, he's feeling this kindness and soft-heartedness and tug at this conflict. And he wants to, he so bad wants to have peace between this external conflict we're dealing with. And I had this conversation on the phone with him where I was trying to explain to him the situation we were in, and basically some things blew up and got even worse. And I was trying to explain it to him. And as I'm walking through, I realized I'm in debate mode with it. I'm putting out my arguments. I'm laying them out in this, like I'm arguing a court case. And he's just on the other line, just listening to me. And at the end of it, he sounded like a whipped puppy. And I realized that I was letting my anger and frustration for the other thing cloud my judgment and the way that I dealt with this kind-hearted man on our team. And so I was like, man, I am so sorry. I came at you and I didn't mean to, and it wasn't right of me though. And I think as leaders too, when we do act in such a way that is not Christ-like, I think it should be us who are the first to say, I'm sorry, I was wrong, I made a mistake. And I think that goes a long way with your team too. If you're willing to do that and be humble, they're willing to trust you, as you walk through even more difficult things. So yes, unfortunately made more mistakes than I'd like to admit. Conflict, even negative conflict, can still have positive outcomes. And so I remember early on in our church's life, this is before Nick came and some of our other guys. It was just me and my wife, and we had another team of guys who wanted to start a church in Ogden. And, we didn't ask a lot of the hard questions. We didn't see if we aligned on, philosophy of ministry. We didn't know what to even ask. I'd never started a church before. I didn't even know what I was doing. So we start going through the process and everything seems great. We all love Jesus. We all want to see, churches get started and it's all great. And as we're walking through the first days of the church, we're hitting some frustrating points and tension. And I don't understand the tension. They don't understand the tension, but it's tension. So we start unraveling the tension and working through it. And honestly, we're having these 3-hour meetings. They're not going anywhere. And it's one after the next. And eventually, these guys leave. And I remember there's an older mentor in my life, and he said, if they leave, your church is going to die. So when they started talking about leaving, I thought, man, what am I going to do? I don't have a plan B. I don't know the job I'm going to have. So we only had like 40 people at the time. We went down to about 15 people, 6 months in. And I was like, I don't know what's going to happen. But God continued to grow his church. And so we had just people coming in that summer and that fall, and people who were just new to the area. And they started getting plugged in, and our team was even stronger than before. And then Daniel came on, and we had a few, situations here and there with conflicts, and people were just kind of not sure if this was the church for them. They wound up leaving. And then we almost had a brand new church again when Nick came on. It was just new people. And every single time we've had this, the group of maybe not people who aren't quite sure where they fit on the vision, if that's what they want to do. Every single time God has just grown the body. And so what we have now is we have a core of people who understand the vision, who are on board with the vision, who love the church. Our spirit of the church is so much sweeter. There's a sense of camaraderie. There's a sense of, together in unity. And that wouldn't have happened if we still had the same people, part of the same body, because we would have faced that tension. It just would have been ongoing, unresolved tension. But when we confronted the tension and eventually they left, our church got stronger as a result. And also the churches they joined as a result got stronger because they found a place where they could plug in and be and fit, just like with, Paul and Barnabas. As they spread, the gospel spread. And so I think sometimes we think it's disunity or it's bad. But I think sometimes God works through that, God can use that to advance his kingdom. And we look at that in a negative way. I think God may say, no, I'm doing something here. It's bigger than that. I try to follow like a Matthew 18, approach, where I go to the person individually. And I think that's not just one meeting, but I think that's a period of meetings or a period of time. And as we try to approach some resolution, I'm not trying to gossip to everybody. You may have a confidant, a friend that you share this with that you're trying to help process. But apart from those one or two trusted people in my life, I'm not going to tell anybody else. And so I try to bring that up to them first. if that doesn't seem to go well, usually bring a third party mediator into that, conversation. That doesn't seem like it's going well, then at that point, if it's someone in the church, we would probably bring pastors involved with that. And then if that didn't seem to go well at that point, we would bring the church involved in a situation of conflict of that magnitude. We've never had to do that. I mean, honestly, because I think most people usually go, well, I've had my first meeting, didn't go well, let's go into the next, and let's just go straight to nuclear. And I think usually if you take your time and are patient, either you come to an understanding or you realize, one of you realizes or both of you realize this isn't going to work. Like we have irreconcilable differences here, and we're going to have to shift, to our directions. So I think Matthew 18 is a good framework for that. And I think even with those who are believers outside of the church, I think going to them person to person is always a wise and smart approach. And that gets rid of 95% of most conflict. I'd say have a face-to-face private conversation between you and that individual first, where you do more listening than talking, and you ask them to share their heart. And sometimes for that person, maybe you get to the heart of the matter first 5 minutes of the conversation. But the truth is, you might not hit it until 30 minutes in, 45 minutes in, because that person is either ashamed or embarrassed or afraid to really tell you the truth. But until you really know the real issue and the hard issue, you can't really deal with it. And so we want to be combative. We want to come back and defend our point of view, defend our side. But I think most people, again, they want to be heard. They want to be listened to. And so if you can start with that approach, I'm going to just listen. I'm going to hear them out. And then after I've sufficiently heard them out, maybe take the whole meeting. Maybe you don't really come back to the next meeting, but to listen well and then to start sharing, how maybe start to work on how you can get through that conflict. But I think that right there, that simple step, I think most people say, well, I texted them, I emailed them, but there's so much you miss in nonverbal communication. In a text or an email, it's like, 7% of communication comes through written words. 93% comes through your tone of voice and then the nonverbal stuff that you see. And so if you're not sitting across the table from this person, you're not going to be able to deal with that. So I think that would be the biggest advice I would give somebody is sit across the table. Don't do the email text thing. Limit that as much as you can. Set up a meeting. Talk it out. And that goes back to that person to person. We let too much time elapse between, because we got to talk to all our friends first and we got to talk to all these people, and it becomes this big gossipy deal. And then before we realize it, it's blown up into massive proportions where you hear it and you go, okay, hey, we need to talk. Let's talk. First of all, it disarms people because most people do not deal with conflict that way. So when you say you need to talk, they're like, whoa, what's it? Oh man, makes them think about before they start another issue because they know you're going to deal with it that way. You're not going to mess around. You're going to come to the source. And again, not to be mean or angry or come across as, violent or anything like that or quarrelsome, but you're just saying, I'm not going to deal with it. And okay, if there's a real issue here, let's talk about it. Like you have a problem and I want to talk about this problem. And if I did something wrong, I want to know. I want to come at a point where if I did something to offend you, I need to repent to that. I need to get that right. I need to correct that. And if not, then how do we deal with this going forward so we don't deal with this again? And I think honestly, most people, they don't know what to do when someone comes at them and tries to deal with something head on, because that's not what most people do.